We got big problems and big news coming out of China, and friends, unfortunately, that is going to impact all of us in all of the rest of the world. As the economy slows down in China, our banks, all of our financial systems seem to be tied into China, as well as the fact that they're making so many things for us. It is going to spill over and impact to us. But the crazy thing is how much our financial systems, our banks, our markets are all saying how everything is just fine over in China, but that's not what we're seeing in the statistics. That's not what we're seeing out there. Let's get into it, friends. We need to talk about this. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade. And so we're going to be diving into some numbers here. We're going to be talking about what's going on in China for real. China is a communist country that has a fairly free market system, or at least the trappings of a free market system, right? But yet when you look at the major corporations, they all seem to be owned by the Chinese Communist Party. All of the major corporations are held in line and are forced to obey the government and such on everything. Well, what we're seeing is that factories across China have been idled. They are having a major problem with unemployment. We're seeing unofficial numbers because they've canceled the numbers because they didn't like how the numbers were trending, so they just canceled all the numbers. But unofficial numbers are well over 20% unemployment. And for a country that is like a bicycle, right? They need to pedal. They need to keep moving forward or else they fall over. People are moving to the cities looking for jobs. People are constantly needing more income in order to feed their families. People starving in China is not something that doesn't happen, right? I mean, what happens when we were growing up and we didn't eat our vegetables? You know, we got told that there were starving children in China, right? Well, it's not quite as much happening today, but with so many people going out of work, losing their jobs, it is putting tremendous pressure on the social welfare system. It's also putting tremendous pressure on the fact that people aren't able to take care of their older family members, which is a big thing over in China. And so that's happening. And we have a large rising number of unemployed, unmarried men, young men. And this is causing a tremendous amount of strain on the inside of China. Now, we talk about how much money the United States has borrowed, and it's absolutely insane. But China's borrowed quite a bit of money too. As they say, if you borrow $5 million from the bank, you have a problem. If you borrow $50 million from the bank has a problem, right? There's a certain point where if you have borrowed money from a bank, the bank kind of owns you. Until your loan is big enough where you basically own the bank. And China's in that place right now where they've borrowed so much money from American banks, European banks, that if they implode, they're going to take the Western economy down with them. If you thought the whole 2008 banking crisis was bad, you just wait to see what happens when the financial markets, the real estate in China implodes, and we're seeing it. The Chinese government has stepped in with stimulus after stimulus after stimulus. But to just give you an idea here, the Chinese stock market, the Shanghai Composite, is down 10% since May. United States stock market, almost at all-time highs. Chinese stock market, down 10%. It's down 25% from its relative recent high in 2021. So it's been doing this since 2021. That kind of tells you that things are not looking up. We have major number of corporations moving out of China, moving to India, moving their production to India, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam. Now, part of this is due to the trade war between Donald Trump and China, right? Due to the tariffs and everything like that. These companies have decided that, they don't really want to be caught in China. And so they have been moving their factories to other not China places, right? And so this is impacting China dramatically because there's poor workers over in India that will work for cheap. Poor workers in Indonesia, they'll work for cheap. Philippines, Vietnam, other countries like that. And China is really, really getting hammered on this. With all these production facilities moving out of their country, this is putting tremendous strain on their society. And given the fact that they are a totalitarian, evil government, I'm not shedding too many tears for them. But they're starting to have protests. They've had 344 protests just related to construction workers protesting to be paid. Now, if you're familiar with the Chinese economy at all, you'll know about the ghost cities. You'll know about how that they've made it so that real estate investment is the safest place to invest money. And so oftentimes families, as they start to get ahead, they'll buy their, it's not a house because it's more like a condo inside of a high-rise. They're basically buying their apartment. They buy their apartment, and then what they do is they then buy another apartment because the Chinese system allows them to basically buy their unit and then another unit. You can buy 2 units without actually, and you get like shielded from taxes and stuff like that. So basically, everybody does it. They buy their unit and then they buy an investment unit. The problem is these investment units, they're not buying another apartment and then renting it out. What they're doing is they're buying another apartment and then they're just kind of sitting on it. And then they'll sell that apartment to somebody else is the idea. But basically, because they get all these benefits to investing in this real estate, you get these ghost cities where these apartment buildings are being built, but nobody lives there. And that building is right next to another building which nobody lives in, and another building, and another building. And you have these whole cities of empty buildings that nobody lives in, but lots of people in the nearby city have bought them as investment properties. Or you have these development companies that are building these cheap apartment buildings, and then with the hopes that they're going to sell the apartments to people later on. But the problem is that they're having big financial problems. It's one big Ponzi scheme. They're basically building things that nobody really needs. There's way too much housing, and there's really no point to it. It's really the definition of a Ponzi scheme or like a bubble, because there really isn't any use for these things. So when we see major problems happening with construction workers not being paid, when we see these shadow bankings companies, shadow banking is basically when you have a corporation, because they have such stringent rules on banking, what you have is these corporations that aren't banks doing banking-like services that are unregulated. So they do these investments where they're basically like loans, but they're not loans from the Chinese perspective or whatever. So you have this shadow banking system, and we've had some of these banks, some of these shadow banks start to implode. And most of them were involved in these ghost cities, these real estate issues. And because of that, we're seeing problems, cracks spreading throughout the economy because of that. Because many and most of the families inside these cities are exposed to this type of these type of investments. right? I mean, this is something that the average person on the street, they have that second apartment. And the fact that their apartment is about to lose value when they've put this much money into it, and they're not going to be able to sell for anything, more than way down here. This is going to impact people in ways that we haven't seen. And like I said, on top of that, we have all this foreign investment, all this money that's been loaned in from the outside that may never be paid back. And that most U.S. banks, most large U.S. banks have tremendous Chinese exposure. If things go sideways in China, major banks in the U.S. are going to be suffering bad. U.S. Bank, PNC Bank, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, all these banks are going to be impacted dramatically by any kind of issues over in China. And then when we start looking at European banks, same kind of stuff. They're going to be dramatically impacted by this as well. We're not being told about this. Yeah, okay, so it's kind of our fault because we got into a trade war with China, but we kind of won. So we feel bad about it, but the thing is that we've basically just shot our own foot. We've loaned all this money, but then we've made it so that they can't pay us back. And that's gonna blow up in our faces. We've assumed that the world is going to stay stable and everything in the world is going to be just peachy forever and ever. I mean, you look at how many U.S. corporations and everything like that are invested and tied into the Taiwanese, their production of the silicon chips, right? I mean, the most valuable U.S. company on the U.S. stock markets, NVIDIA, uses Taiwanese chips. Apple also uses Taiwanese chips. Amazon uses Taiwanese chips. Tesla and the other car manufacturers, they all use Taiwanese chips. We're just assuming that everything's going to be okay on the Taiwanese Strait between China and Taiwan. As China gets more desperate, will they do something rash? Are they going to look over at the Ukraine invasion by Russia and learn all the wrong lessons? The lesson should be, don't do that. Don't invade anyone near you. And yet they may take from it, if they do things differently, and just they may also take out of that just the fact that the United States and all of our allies are running out of ammunition. We're selling and giving away all of our weapons and such to Ukraine, and the United States is running out. I mean, the United States is like the Walmart of weapons, and yet going to the store and you're starting to see some shortages on the GPS-guided bombs, and seeing some shortages on the missiles on the racks. The Patriot batteries, we seem to be running out of those. The fact that we're running out of Patriot missile batteries is concerning, especially when we're borrowing them from places like Poland. So we have all that happening, and China is definitely looking at Taiwan, and they may be pressured into doing something about it. If they need to take the pressure off of people protesting in the streets because they don't have jobs, they have all these young, unmarried, unemployed men, that's brewing up a Tiananmen Square all over again, right? And a war will definitely give them opportunity to get rid of all, or at least put to use all of these unmarried, unemployed males. Situation is definitely devolving over there, and nobody seems to be talking about it. But we need to talk about it because it is going to impact the United States sooner rather than later. All right, friends, thanks so much for joining with us. We'll keep you up to date on what's going on over there as it happens. We got the stock market moving down over there still. We got protests happening all over the place. We got inflation taking off over there too, but they are pivoting to gold and pivoting their economy to the Brics economies. All right. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.